meeting. We're going to get to this candidate forum really quickly, but we've got a few announcements. So first off, I want to welcome up our Inclusion and Equity Vice Chair, Fatima Argan, with a brief message.
If everyone could just be seated, please. We're trying to get started. Okay. Wow. So I just want to pass on a message as Inclusion and Equity Chair. Give me a second. Here it is. All right. Sorry. So the message I wanted to pass on is, as we begin our very full and impactful program this evening, as chair of the Arlington Dems Inclusiveness and Equity Committee, I want to have put out an important reminder of the values that inform our committee and Arlington Democrats as a whole. Engaging with each other with sensitivity and awareness and inclusivity. Acting in a spirit of genuine curiosity to gain understanding about our neighbors, and finally, exemplifying the best of our shared commitment to democratic values designed to foster equity and unity within our community. So thank you for considering these thoughts. Thank you for considering these thoughts in your interactions tonight.
Thank you, Fatima. All right, we got a couple more announcements, and let's see, everyone, if you need to, wear a mask. And welcome to the Arlington Democrats monthly committee meeting. We are an open and welcoming committee. Everyone is welcome here. Everyone has an important voice and is included and belongs. Let's see, our second Saturday breakfast, which should be next Saturday, we're not going to have. It's canceled because of the school board endorsement vote. So please do not go to Busboys and Poets next Saturday morning for that normally terrific event. And again, our school board endorsement vote starts on Sunday, May 7th, and will continue on Wednesday and the following Saturday. Hope everyone will show up to vote for one of our terrific school board candidates seeking the Democratic endorsement. Here's a QR code if you would like to sign up to volunteer for that terrific event. I'll give you a second on that, but only a second. And you should have an email in your inbox for me this morning as well on how to sign up for that terrific event. And our communications chair, I know, has a couple quick announcements. Paul, if that mic's working.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, good. Go. Hello. We are looking for feedback on the Arlington Democrats website. Steve had put together and the steering committee approved a process where we're evaluating our website sheets. So please give us your feedback. Use this QR code. It simply links to a very quick Google form. Let us know what the features are that you think are important. Do we need, a more prominent calendar, an e-merchandise store like the Fairfax Dems have? Do we need better accessibility features? What are those features? Let us know. Your participation is really key into this process. So take out your phones and you can scan that QR code right there. Just give you just really quick few seconds to do that. 3, 2, and guess what? I got another QR code for you. All right, so in a different capacity, we are now, and I know this seems inconceivable to some of you, but 2024, right around the corner. President just announced that he's running for re-election, and that's right. Let's go. We have a lot to be proud of with that. We have a lot to be proud of under this president. I know we can count on you. We're beginning to pull together the volunteers who are going to help us put this president on the ballot and begin to build up our volunteer base for the reelection. So there are sign up sheets in the back of the room. You also can sign up at the form at that QR code, and that's it.
Thank you, Paul. And now a quick announcement from Grayson on our farmers market effort.
Hey everybody, Grayson Lewis. I'm the co-director of the farmers market of voters registration, which we do most Saturdays. They're starting up again in May. So if you have just a couple of hours of your time from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. or from 10 a.m. to noon on Saturdays, please go to the Arlington Dems Mobilize and sign up. We really appreciate it. You can also scan the QR codes that are on some of these little sheets here on your seats. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Grayson. Now is Varun Nagor with us. Is Varun here?
I'm on.
Sangeeta, do we
Can you hear
have
me?
Varun?
It should be virtual.
Oh, he's.
Can you all hear or see me?
All right, Varun is only virtual with us, so we will not have our AAPI presentation. Is he ready? Can we get sound on him?
Sound.
All right.
Go ahead, Varun.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Varun Nakor. My day job is as executive director of the AAPI Victory Alliance. I'm a longtime Arlingtonian. I've lived here for over 30 years, but my family has lived in Arlington for over 50 years. So it's a pleasure to be with you. I know I just have a few minutes, but happy AAPI Heritage Month to everyone. May is a time that we celebrate our cultural heritage. And while 2/3 of AAPIs in this country are first-generation immigrants, of course, we've been here since the dawn of the revolution, and not many people really understand that. Do you all have my slides up?
Yes.
There we go. So perhaps some little known facts that APIs are the fastest growing demographic in Arlington. I had to double check this today. And so we're growing in between 2010 and 2020 at close to 2 times the rate of Arlingtonians overall. And I think that's something that has to sort of be recognized. And the useful chunk of information here is that we can utilize the APIs in Arlington. And I know you all, do such an amazing job in Arlington, reaching out to folks all over the state, but specifically APIs who in Arlington who tend to be more well-educated than APIs in other parts of the state. We can actually utilize the APIs in Arlington to do voter contact, specifically because close to 75% of APIs do not speak English as their first language in homes. And so sometimes English is a barrier, and having someone who's a native speaker is extremely important to do that voter contact. Next slide, please. So, I think we skipped one, thanks. Yeah, so there we go, Virginia. So I was going to start local and broaden ourselves out a little bit. So overall API growth in Virginia is 62% between 2010 and 2020. Some of the facts that I mentioned earlier in terms of limited English proficiency, the 31% are the folks who are limited English proficient, of course, but 75%, as I said earlier, are APIs who don't speak English in their homes. Very, very, I think, important fact. 6.2% of the overall electorate in the state, and it is, I think, the fastest growing. I wasn't able to verify this by the time of this presentation, but I believe it's either the fastest growing or the second fastest growing demographic in the state. Next slide, please. So The 2020 election was a high watermark for APIs, and one I think that's going to still continue. So there was a 48%. I realize this chart's rather small, but there was a 48% increase in API turnout between 2016 and 2020. This was the highest increase of any demographic ever in the history of the United States. We have not been able to find where, say, Irish Americans between 1880 and 1890 increased their voter turnout by X percentage, right? So this is something that I think is going to continue, and even in 2020, despite this large increase of 48%, API still undervoted the national electorate by anywhere between 5 and 7 points. So there's still a lot more APIs out there to get, is the bottom line of this slide. So some of you may have seen this chart in the Washington Post. I think it was in the last day or so. So the headline was Black turnout decreased in the midterm elections. And I think the thing to recognize here, and also with respect to the Asian American community, is that yes, it was down, but you're looking at a high watermark in 2018. And so it's really, really hard to turn out. It was really hard in 2022 to turn out our people like it was in 18, when you've got that big, orange monster out there spoiling everybody's day on a daily basis. But in terms of the measure of decline between 2018 and 2022, it was rather nominal for the API community. Next slide. And so my last slide is this, that about 1 million new APIs enter the US every year, and eventually most of them will become citizens. And so we're talking about a population where the political engagement is still very much underway, and it will continue. And since every election since 2017, the Virginia election in 2017, and every election until 2022, API voters have been punching above their weight. And by that specifically, what I mean is, so our organization ran a program primarily based in Hampton Roads and Virginia Beach in 2021. And the API population, and I'm going from memory here because I wasn't able to find the exact stat, but it was in this ballpark that it represented about 5% of the population down in Hampton Roads. But in terms of the final vote share in that 21 election, it represented about 7.5% of all the votes cast. And so it's, I think, important to recognize that APIs are a gettable community. It's extremely important when there is any voter contact being done to let them know that you're loud and proud about being Democrats, because oftentimes APIs who are contacted don't know who's contacting them, and they want to align, but they just don't know because they're newer voters to the system. And the last point being that I believe, and I don't think that I'm wrong, that APIs have one of the best returns on political investment. I screwed up that acronym. Sorry, I'm dealing with some health issues here. But I believe that APIs are one of the best returns on political investment in the entire country. And for every dollar that you put in, you get more than $1 in return. And there are very few places in modern politics where you can even move the needle by 1%, let alone 2%. And seeing a 48% increase between 2010 and 2020, I think is something that's going to be one for the history books. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Varun. Thank you for being with us virtually and giving us that amazing presentation. AAPI community is such an important part of our community, and we're really pleased to be able to have this program during AAPI Heritage Month. I know our outreach chair, Sangeeta, will have some additional announcements around some events coming later in the month, so look forward to those announcements. after our main event tonight, the county board candidate forum. I'd like to invite up all of our candidates if I could. Please, everyone, give them a big round of applause. I want to welcome up our moderator for the evening, Michael Pope from Virginia Public Radio. And he's going to quickly go through the rules of this event while Mike and I distribute question cards for people that would like to ask questions. Mike.
Great, this is a real treat, so thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. I apologize to people on this side of the room because you guys get a partially obstructed view. I have to stand here so that I can see our candidates. And did we determine the order of our questions?
Did not.
We did not. Did we determine the order of the questions? Well, I'll just go by the way.
See, we go in order and you rotate to.
Okay.
Next one gets question two.
All right, so we're going to go Weaver, copy, Spain, just want to make sure I'm following.
No methods of that.
And now. We have a limited amount of time, so I want to jump right to it. I guess a little bit about the rules. There will be no opening statements. No opening statements, candidates, but don't worry because you'll get a closing statement. And we want all of your answers to be 2 minutes. So you get a 2-minute closing statement, and then all of the questions I ask you will also be 2 minutes. Except for the lightning round question, which we may or may not be getting from the audience. So questions, we want your questions from the audience. There are people walking around grabbing your questions. Feel free to ask any question that you want. And if you want to ask a lightning round question, maybe a yes or no question, or a question that might elicit a one-word answer, that would be great. With that, I think we are going to just jump right into our first question. And I'm going to start stage candidates. I'm going to start stage right and move this way. So Weaver first and this way. All right. So I want to start with missing middle. What else? I mean, what else are we going to do? How candidates, how do you see the county implementing missing middle? Are there specific things that you would like to see changed with it? If it's eliminated, what happens next? Mr. Weaver, we will start with you. 2 minutes, please.
Last. Make sure you're awake.
Okay. Now that everybody's awake. That's a great question. And I think that first and foremost, the way that we have handled missing middle has been somewhat unfortunate. I feel that both sides have chosen to really turn it into a yes or no type situation. And when you create an environment like that, you really kind of set the stage for a combative experience. And I think that fundamentally, with any leader who we elect to the county board, should bring a non-adversarial approach towards solving challenging problems. There are many sides to the missing middle policy, and I feel fundamentally where we can work with both sides to create positive outcomes. Personally, I supported missing middle. I supported a number of elements of the policy that was put forward. I think that duplexes, semi-detached, and fourplexes on some of the largest lot sizes are appropriate. I think that we really need to watch carefully with the permits that get pulled over the next 6 months, and then reevaluate and assess with the incoming board. So that's my general stance on missing middle, and it looks like my time is up. So thank you.
Maureen Powell, missing middle.
Okay, great. Hello. So I think that we all have a lot of frustration when we're coming through this missing middle process. There were a lot of communication errors. There were a lot of things that make people feel unhappy, reasonably so, I think. And the number one thing I would say is the lack of connection to the larger vision for Arlington. How does missing middle actually connect to where we're going and what we have here in the county? I think when it comes to what was passed, I'm interested in seeing how it plays out. I'm a policy analyst. That's what I do professionally. So I'm really interested in seeing how this all goes, collecting data, analyzing it, assessing it, monitoring it, and making decisions based off of what we know at the time. And when it comes to that, I think the real key next step for us as a community is figuring out what that longer term vision actually is. How do we connect in things like our essential services? How do we connect in transportation and parks and sewers and stormwater? That's really what I see as the most important next step for us as a community. We don't get a do-over. I know everyone's really frustrated, no matter which side of this you were on. There is no do-over, there's only a do next. And what I think we need to do next is really learn from this process, learn from what went wrong, never repeat that ever again. And move forward as we kind of bring everyone together, bring everyone to the table to talk about how this is going to play out and what we really need to solve our housing and our larger issues, because housing is just one of the things that is facing our community right now. We also have environmental issues. We also have school and childcare issues. We also have mental health issues. We need to be taking all of that into account at the same time as we move forward from this process.
Mr. Spain, your thoughts on implementing and or changing missing middle?
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. And many of you in this room know my history as relates to missing middle. I've been behind it for a number of years. Is it the end all be all fix all? It is not. But I think it was a move in the right direction. And I'm so proud of the coalition of about 20 some odd organizations that represent large bodies of people in this community. As we analyze in the next year or so the impact of missing middle, and that's what we're going to have to do, we will see what the next course may be. I believe that we need to diversify our housing stock, our portfolio here in Arlington County. I have a 29, a 28, and a 24-year-old. Neither one or two at the top can come back and buy a home in Arlington. They don't want to rent and pay $3,000 a month for rent and $500 in HOA fees, and they can't buy a house. But when 75% of your land is occupied only for single family housing, Democrats, we deliver. We believe that housing is a right, and we need to work hard to diversify our stock and make it accountable for anyone in this community that wants to buy. Now, we're going to have to see in a year or so. There's a cap right now of about 58. I don't think we're going to get to 58, but let's see what happens. Let's analyze it, come back to the community. I understand there's some tension, but we didn't just start this a year and a half ago, right? This goes all the way back to our good friend Eric Gutshield and his idea, and many folks in this room. And we're not going to get to 100% on any policy here in Arlington. It is unfortunate that we have divided our community on this one single issue. And there's those here that's all they want to focus on. We need to unite this party. We need to unite this community, not divide this community. And that's what this continued conversation on missing middle housing is doing, in my opinion. Thank you.
Susan Cunningham, your thoughts on implementing missing middle or changing it?
Great. Well, thank you all for being here tonight. Missing middle has taken a lot of oxygen out of the room. So we have been super focused on it as a community. And as the policy rolls out in July, we're going to need to make sense of it and move forward. I do think that it really is an opportunity for us to learn a few lessons. Every time something goes haywire is a good time to not waste a crisis and learn from it. So I would expect us to really focus on an after action of how this went, what we can learn, how we'll do better next time, and moving forward. On the policy itself, it will be implemented before these two seats are seated. July 1, 12:01 in the morning, we'll learn some information about how it's going. And by the time we are there, I think we will, as a community, have some inclination of whether there's a problem, whether it's exciting and perfect, or someplace in between. And I think that through the next couple of years, as particularly while we have the guardrails there with the caps, monitoring closely is going to be really important. And I would say especially monitoring on some of the elements of diversity, and of affordability. So I think there's a difference of opinion about how that may go in the near term, and we will need to watch for that. And then the last thing is the biggest and the most important, which is my biggest problem with missing middle was not just the process, but the fact that we did not do a comprehensive look at housing. So I'm trained as an engineer, I've got 2 degrees in mechanical engineering from Yale. I was a housing executive here in Arlington. And the fact is, housing is complicated. And housing this whole community in its diversity and amazingness is also complicated. And we oversimplified, in my opinion. And that doesn't mean we can't go back and make some modifications. But we do need to look at lot coverage, the ADU rules, property tax controls, et cetera.
All right, housing is complicated, but we still have a 2-minute time limit on our answers. Missing middle, implementing and or changing.
Well, one of the notes is everybody, this works because I can hear myself echo throughout the room. I am a supporter of missing middle as it was passed because as a renter, I've spent over 7 years here in the county. And the possibility of buying a home, of looking into where we can permanently set up roots here in the county is not a possibility for people like myself, who are younger renters, but it's also something that as we age in place here across the county has caused a lot of issues for folks who want to also be able to downsize. Now that missing middle has been passed, we do have to keep a close eye on the implementation. I want to make sure that these new housing stock options are truly available across the county. That we're not just creating them in one pocket of Arlington, one neighborhood, but that we're really looking at the diversity that can exist in these housing stock options from south to north, east to west, to make sure everybody has an opportunity to buy into this new aspect here. Of course, one of the biggest issues that has been discussed is the question of affordability. We know now that missing middle is never going to truly be able to address that issue. And as much as I would have loved to see, from the 58 unit cap, a percentage of that being pushed towards affordable housing, I think that's really going to be the next conversation that we're going to have as a county is what is affordable housing going to look like? Where can we implement it? And can we also ensure that that is something that's accessible and equitably distributed across the county? So, it's now going to be that process again of monitoring every step of the way, seeing how it's actually the uptake of it. For statistics, we need at least 30 units to be built to make sure that something's statistically viable and we can run these tests. So it's going to take some time for us to get there, but we really do have to look at this now on July 1st and moving forward.
Natalie Roy, your thoughts on missing middle, implementing and or changing?
Thank you, and it's good to see such a large crowd here tonight. I agree with much of what was said here. I think that we are all in common agreement. It sounds like that what missing middle, and I prefer to use the term that was used later, and which was EHO or density program, really left us with a divided community here. That is going to be one of the boards, the 2024 boards, big roles in the next term is to actually bring our community together. Because I think this was a big issue. It was a big divide. It was very divisive. I did not support the density program. I still do not support it. It was pinning its hopes on developers to build affordable housing. That to me was not a credible or responsible approach. I'm a real estate professional. That's not what happens in the development world. The other more frustrating piece was that it didn't look at the cross-cutting issues of infrastructure, schools, the impact on the environment, parking. It didn't look at that. It said, we're going to do this first, and we are going to then reassess and evaluate. So now, as many of my fellow candidates have said, we're going to evaluate the process. We're going to look at July 1st, everything launches. And then what we're going to do is look at what's happened. The next 6 months are going to be really critical. And we should be looking at all that data. There should be a public dashboard that the county has, that you don't have to call somebody, that you actually can see where the permits are being issued, what kind of project it is, how much those units are being sold for, so we can really evaluate. Because as it's also been stated, this wasn't about affordability or about diversity. This was about density. So I think we need to be really careful about what this is. And next time we do something like this, we need goals and metrics to measure them.
All right, so that's our first question. I have to point out in the interest of time, we have about less than an hour, which includes the closing statement. So this whole thing is going to go by really fast. Our next question, I want to try, let's do the lightning round. Let's just see how this works here. This comes from the audience. And so we are going to start with coffee and then move down the line. So Weaver will be last on this one. Okay. So Maureen, coffee. Lightning round question from the audience. This is a yes or no question. 30 seconds. You support zoning amendments to allow more height and lot coverage to promote more missing middle housing. Recopy first.
I think it has to be studied. I don't think that I could say for sure yes or no right now. I think that that's part of the longer term, figuring out what the vision and the plan is for Arlington.
In Spain, your thoughts on
Yeah.
zoning amendments for more height.
Yeah, I don't want to have make a premature decision on that. That's why we have commissions and we want to go talk to the communities. I can tell you right now, when it comes to height, there are several communities that are, don't want to do that. So I would want to wait and see and look at that, analyze it before making a really solid decision on that. Okay.
Susan Cunningham, your thoughts on height for missing middle.
Was that one? Hit the button. Technology. There we go. My answer would be no, with an asterisk, which is, I think that we may in the future want to do an affordable housing overlay where a certain percentage may be able to have exceptions like that. But for the time being, any additional height would be a site plan review.
Jonathan Drunkel.
Yeah.
I apologize. Your thoughts on exchanging height for missing middle housing?
Yeah, so I think it's something that needs to be done through a community-driven policy approach. We know already how divisive missing middle was to begin with. And this is going to be a hot topic. So I think, like most of my colleagues have mentioned, this is something we need to look at.
Natalie Roy, your thoughts on height for missing middle housing?
And I would say no, also with an asterisk, which basically we need to study this. We need to have long-range strategic plan on this so that we're not only looking at affordable housing, we're looking at deeply affordable housing. We haven't been talking about that, and missing middle housing for our essential workers. So I think we need to, I agree with most of everything I've heard up here in terms of looking at a long-range plan.
And Mr. Weaver, your thoughts on exchanging height for missing middle housing?
I agree with this, my colleagues, so we need to study it further, but I will say that we need to focus on providing expedited site plan processes for 4 to 12 unit apartment buildings that are in areas near amenities and transit locations. So that's my caveat.
Okay, we are going to go back to our 2 minutes. So you got a whole 2 minutes for this next one. So the question is this, also on the topic of housing, in a county where residential, actually, before we do that, just to make sure we've got our order here, we're going to start with Mr. Spain, then go down the line. And all right, so also about housing, in a county where residential lots cost $1 million or more, what will you do to make certain Arlington remains a county where regular people can live, work, and raise a family? Mr. Spain.
Well, that's a tough one. I've been here 14 years and it's going up every year. I think, as we look at housing in Arlington and lots and land, we got to look at very innovative approaches to how we build housing, right? Our housing stock. I think there's some conversation right now that's going on the board as far as with community land trusts, those types of options that could be feasible here, where we can lock in housing, land at a set rate. But before I go down that road, I want to have a really extended conversation with the community to really discuss the pros and cons to community land trust. There's some favorable things about that. There's 253 communities across America that are running community land trust right now and are working well. But yeah, it'll take a little time. Unfortunately, the price of land here in Arlington goes up every year. There's really no way to kind of block it and stop it. Okay?
Susan Cunningham, what would you do to make sure regular people can live, work in Arlington County?
First of all, I object to the question. Everyone is above average in Arlington. But if we take it at face value, I think for making sure that everyone can stay and live in Arlington County, there are, again, a couple of levers that need to be used. One of them is really encouraging reuse of existing buildings, which is environmentally aligned with our goals as a county. And also a very, very important way to house, especially some of our larger families. So in our neighborhood, we were able to bring one of the very large Afghani families into the neighborhood by holding on to one of those properties and renovating it, making sure it was ready for them. Second piece is for our aging residents having property tax deferral. So I know it's hard sometimes to feel sad for someone who's sitting on a $2 million asset, but the reality is if you're on a fixed income, that property tax is going to keep climbing up and it may force you out. And so while you'll come out in the end, you won't have a home and you won't have your community, and we can do better than that. And then I think the last piece would be just being an inclusive and welcoming community, which we have a strong history of doing. And I don't think we did a great job on the missing middle. And people did not feel welcome, did not feel comfortable with each other, and we've got to do that.
Mr. Drumgold, what would you do to make sure all of Arlington's above average people can stay and live and work in Arlington?
Yeah, so I mean, I think just with that question of regular people, right, we really have to look at what we're talking about here in the county. We could have a whole separate question on what that actually means. And what, frankly, I've experienced as a resident here in the county. And anyways, but we really need to focus on every aspect of affordable housing. How can we make sure that that's an option for both renters and homeowners? That's looking at things like making sure that folks that live at the 50% area median income have access to a home or have access to rent, but we also got to bring that down all the way down to folks that are at 30%, 10%. We've all been to the same presentations by a lot of our community members, community partners, and folks that are at 30% AMI level, there's only 20% of our housing stock that's actually available to them at that level, which means that for those folks, they're already rent burning, which means we start to compete more for housing options across the county, which means that by the time you're reaching, however we want to define regular folks, we are all competing for the same housing stock. It's rent burdensome on everybody, on all of us here at the same time. So we really have to make sure that when we're looking at affordable housing, we're truly ensuring that we're starting at the lowest level of whatever you want to consider regular people, and making sure that there's options there for folks in the county. Too many individuals are facing right now the option saying, do I pay more for rent? Do I pay more for my mortgage? Or do I have to move out of the county? We're losing talent. We're losing incredible small businesses. We're losing, just a wealth of information and individuals who are being pushed out to neighboring jurisdictions. And we really have to look at what we're doing as a county, how we can fix that. Affordable housing is going to be that first step. But I think we really need to revisit the topic of what we define as regular here in the county.
Maybe the question should have been, what the heck is a regular person? And have you ever met one? Natalie Roy, what would you do to make sure that quote unquote regular people or Arlington's above average people can live, work, and raise a family in Arlington?
I think there's a many-pronged approach here. One, and I agree with much of what I've heard. I would, as a real estate professional, I negotiate for a living. And one of the things that we desperately need in this county is units, places for families. And I would work very hard with other county board members to make sure that we're leveraging as much for new developments, new high rises, that are rentals, making sure that they're not just studios and 1 and 2 bedrooms, but they're actually 3 bedrooms. That's really, really important because we don't have enough, enough places for families. Another on the affordable, sort of missing middle, I would, and density, I would look for opportunities. And that means we're a land-strapped county. We don't have much here. And when we do have opportunities, we should be looking at that. So for instance, the Key Bridge Marriott that was condemned and fenced off. That's about 5.5 acres, I believe. That's an opportunity. The county needs to have a very good land use sort of strategy so that they can move swiftly when opportunities like that arise. So secondly, what some of my colleagues have said here is that the vacant commercial space and opportunity, like what the Key Bridge Marriott and also the Rouse family, land over by Eden Center. These are opportunities that we can actually build housing. We can look to do model programs. We need to think outside the box. We need to be innovative so that when an opportunity like that arises, we're not left saying, what are we going to do? And the optics in terms of removing folks who are homeless from that high rise were a real problem. I think I see my sense. Thank you.
Mr. Weaver, what will you do to make sure people can live, work, and raise a family in Arlington?
Yes, so I think the first thing that the county can do is give county employees a raise. Bottom line, the amount that we pay our teachers is just absurd low. These are the folks who are really defining and shaping the minds of the future. And I think that we need to dramatically increase the amount that we pay them. So first and foremost, that's what I would start with. Second, I think that, when I think about people in Arlington, people that I'm most concerned with are maybe not the regular people, but the folks who are in the lowest income brackets. And I think that we have a commitment to help deal with the reality that we have had a tremendous loss of market rate affordable units in Arlington over the last 10 to 15 years. And the only way that we are going to be able to deal with that, make up for that significant loss, is provide more affordable housing grants. Specifically, I would like to see more affordable housing grants go towards working families. I'd like to see the income limitation on that increase so that it's more accessible for more folks. I would also like to see more projects such as the Barcroft Department of Development that guarantee more committed affordable units. Bottom line, the only way that we're going to make housing more affordable for folks is by increasing the salaries of the folks whose salaries we control. We don't control every salary in the private sector, but the county board does control the salaries of the folks who work for us. So I think we need to increase those and double down on providing more resources to the folks who are hurting the hardest.
Maureen Coffey, what will you do to make sure people in Arlington can afford to live, work, and raise a family here?
Absolutely. So I am, I guess, one of those regular people. I did my taxes last month and looked at my annual income. I'm 60% AMI. Let's be honest about what that looks like. I have a master's degree. I work in research. I am 60% of the area median income in Arlington. That's because the area median income is extremely high here. And so we do need wages to catch up. That's got to be part of this equation. We got to support our unions. We got to support unionization, not just in the public sector, but across all of our workforce. We also need to be building to match our demand. Our housing needs analysis shows that even at the rate we are currently building, we're going to be 28,000 units behind. That is not going to help affordability. That's not going to help people to stay in this area. And we also need, I want to say, I have my notes here, almost 10,000 more ownership units by 2040. And over the last 5 years, we've built less than 400 ownership units new in the county. And so if we're not matching our quantity of building with the quantity of demand, prices are going to continue to go up. People are going to continue to be pushed out. Just this summer, I was outbid on rent by people willing to offer hundreds of dollars more per month over the listed rent price. That's not sustainable for normal people. That's not sustainable for me. My rent to stay in the same building I already lived in went up 12.5%. My salary went up 4%. That's not going to keep working for people. That math does not work out. And part of that is also we need to stop just thinking about ownership. I know ownership is a great thing and I aspire to that one day too, but I know that's not my near-term future. We need renting to be stable for people. We need rental protections for people. We need to make sure the quality of our rental units is also safe and accessible for everyone. As we're building, we need to segment our market and make sure that we're meeting all of these goals and not just the easiest to meet.
All right. I think we got all the candidates on. To make sure. Next, please keep me up to date here in case someone feels like that we reached out. And also, don't forget that you've got the rebuttal 30 seconds.
What?
I don't know why I'm coming in and out like
We have
this.
a what?
We have a rebuttal?
Yes, I apologize. I think maybe you don't have rebuttals, right? Perhaps we should have laid that out at the top.
News to me.
I think there was some talk of a 30-second rebuttal, but since we didn't mention it at the top, maybe we don't want to change the rules while we're playing the game. So we are going to renters from the audience, so I want to ask one of those. How will you ensure that renters are equally represented in civic engagement? Susan. go ahead.
Oh, it's a great question and a perennial.
On here now.
This keeps, I think this one's dying. There we go. It's a great question and a perennial question actually in Arlington, because Arlington, at least in its modern history, has always had a very large population of renters. So that's fluctuated between 50 and 70% at times. We're a little bit above where we've been, but we're nowhere near the height of that. So the reality is engagement is different at different stages of your life and different ages and different cultural backgrounds. And one of our challenges as a community is figuring out how to do that in the modern world. So we do have some work to do there, but it is not different in terms of having wildly more renters than before. I was a renter in this county for many, many years. And while towards the end of that, I began to get engaged in commissions and boards, it was not the first priority right up front. Like I was trying to find laundry rooms. So I think we can do better, but it is a little bit of a, were there two questions or you're just asking one?
Well, for the record, in case we're curious about the questions from the audience, there were two on renters. They were very similar. How will you ensure that renters are equally represented in civic engagement? That's the question I asked. The other one was, do you think that renters need more representation in public life in Arlington? So basically the same question.
Yeah, and I'll just wrap up because I know we're near the end, but basically the county board represents all of Arlington. We are all at large. And regardless of your income, regardless of your housing situation, we would represent you. And so it's important to know some of those contexts at times, but it really doesn't matter. You're our people once you're in Arlington.
Jonathan Drunkle, what talk about your thoughts on renters and their involvement in civic engagement?
Yeah, so I'm a renter, very civically engaged, running for office right now as we speak. I've been involved with our Democratic Party and, multiple ways that from day one, when I moved into this county, I said, this is my community. I'm going to be here for the long term, not just for a year and not just for one presidential administration, but I have commitments to be here and to set up roots and to make sure that I have the opportunity to look forward to establishing a home, having a family, or whatever else I choose to do here in the county. Renters are not represented at the level that they should be in civic engagement across the board, period, full stop. When it comes to civic federations and civic associations, there's many of them that do not allow renters to be represented on there because you either have to be a homeowner or a business owner. You have to sometimes petition those civic associations and make the argument that you deserve the right to be on them. 3 out of 5 Arlingtonians are renters, yet on a 5-person county board, we do not have a voice. So we're talking about making sure that we're making policies that are for everyone in the county. The fact that we do not have a renter, kind of contradicts that aspect and saying, missing middle, there wasn't a renter. Whatever policy it might be, there isn't a renter right now. So no, renters are not adequately represented. We need to do more. We need to find more ways to bring renters in. And we honestly need to stop discriminating against renters in conversations saying that, hey, why would I have a conversation with you? Why would I follow up in voter engagement? You're just going to leave the county. I've heard it personally throughout this campaign. This is something that we really need to work on combating because renters are here to stay. We're 60% and growing in the county, and we truly do need better representation.
Natalie Roy, what will you do to ensure that renters are equally represented in civic engagement?
Can you hear me? Hello. Yes, you can hear me. Well, the first thing that I would do is make sure that we, the county board, go to where people are. And I think that's really, really important. And that goes to any community group that you're talking about, but especially when you're talking about renters. I think that you would actually, it'd be well served for us to actually, instead of always have meetings at 2100, that the new county board would make a real effort to go out into the community and actually meet with folks, have meetings with folks where they are, And that's important for renters, that's important for any community organization. And I think, I don't know about everybody on this panel, but I mean, I've been a renter. I think that renters contribute just like anyone else. And it's important to hear the voice of everybody in the community. But again, I think the biggest thing that we could do is make sure that we go out to the community and we hear and we listen to what people are saying and what they want. Thank you.
And Tony Weaver, what will you do to make sure renters are equally represented in civic engagement?
Yes, it's a great question. I was recently a renter. I bought a condo 2 years ago in the middle of the pandemic. And so I've got kind of a good position to see both sides of this issue. And I have found that once I bought a home, I suddenly became a little bit more engaged with my community, particularly with the HOA. And I think that this is a really big challenge because folks who are renting aren't necessarily quite as engaged at that level. And I think that one of the ways that we need to deal with the problem of underrepresentation is to really encourage voting. Bottom line, if you want whatever your interests are, if you are not actively voting, and if that group of people is not actively voting, they tend to be underrepresented. So I think we need to work it's across the board to make sure that voting turnout is high in areas where there's high rates of renting. Because if we do that, we know that those folks will have a better, more substantial voice in the decisions that are being made. I think, as many of my colleagues mentioned, we need to do a much better job in how we engage different elements of the community. Particularly, I feel that certain voices are heard very frequently. Certain organizations, commissions receive a lot of attention, and we need to be very careful about how we weigh them. Just because a group is the most vocal does not necessarily mean that they are representative of the entire community. And oftentimes, many voices that are often unheard have a very important say, and the community should have an important say. So meeting folks where they're at, I think, is incredibly important. Making sure that our board meetings are more accessible, and that when folks come, we are actively listening, and we're actively engaging with different people who aren't necessarily the loudest.
Maureen Coffey, what will you do to make sure that renters are equally represented in civic engagement?
I've been working on this since I was 22. I joined the board of the Civic Federation at 22 years old because I thought it was important that other people have a voice in this county. I've been active in my neighborhood association. I'm on the Clarendon Courthouse Civic Association. And I can tell you, in Clarendon Courthouse, a neighborhood that is almost entirely rentals, 3 of us are renters that show up to meetings. It's not because people don't care. It's not because young folks don't care. And another thing is that we also need to check our privilege when it comes to talking about renters and acting like they all are people who look like me. There's a lot of people who rent in this county who are older, who have lived here for years, people who have rented for 15 or 20 years in the same community, people who have owned and have moved back into renting because that makes more sense for them. We really need to have people that look like us, represent us, and who understand what we're going through. Right now, when it comes to all of our housing issues, yes, we are all feeling a housing crunch right now, but that housing crunch affects different people differently. It affects renters differently. I have good relationships with all of our county board members. I come to public comment, I come to Open Door Monday, I talk, I try. I was the statewide Virginia Young Democrats president, working with young people to get them engaged, to bring them to the table, to get them nominated to commissions on the statewide level. I've been doing this work, and it's hard when you don't see it reciprocated back, when you don't see leadership wanting to see you. And that's part of why I jumped into this. As we're having conversations about housing, about our community, when we're having those conversations and you're looking around at people saying what young people and what renters need, and you look around and none of those people in that conversation are young people or renters, it's really frustrating. So that's part of what I'm trying to do here. That's part of what I'm trying to bring. I've been working on this. I'm going to keep working on this. I think that we can do better with our digital engagement. I think that our website is a mess. It needs to be redone. And I think that we can be more intentional with our strategic engagement as well. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Spade, Last person.
Yes, I'm the last one.
Yeah, what will you do to make sure renters are equally represented in city engagement?
Yeah, who can go after that? Marines just hit all the knocked out the park. But I will tell you this, I feel the frustration of our renters here in Arlington. One of my children rent, and the problem is, when you talk about renters, we're having the same conversation we're talking about homeowners. I see a lot of the conversations, we pit in groups against each other. And that's not healthy for our community. There's also this sense of entitlement because I've been in Arlington longer. I know better. Renters have just as much right to be heard as everyone else. And in my travels in the past 14 years of being here in Arlington, I've seen it firsthand. I've seen how commissions were constructed and put together. I've seen who's been on the tenant landlord commission. And a lot of time it's not representative of this beautiful community that we have. So if I'm on the county board, what's going to happen is first, we're going to take a look at some of these commissions that we have and make sure they're representative of our community. Second, we're going to make sure renters are heard. I agree with everything Maureen is talking about digital innovation. The county is in the dark ages. All right, I work in corporate America and somebody's shut the system down over here in Arlington. But we can do better. But if you want to meet people where they are, back to what Natalie was saying, that's what we're going to have to do. You have to rid yourself of old methodologies and approaches because it's 2023, not 1973. Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna try another lightning round questions. And I'm gonna go first, we're gonna go around, so I guess this is a yes or no question from the audience. Should the Arlington County Board raise their own salary?
We still get 30 seconds for this?
You can get 30 seconds if you want to, yes, but we want a yes or a no.
So, yes.
Yes.
I mean, at the end of the day, the Arlington County Board is here to serve all of you, right? When we go ahead and start comparing the area median income and compare with the salaries of our county board members, it doesn't add up. And these are the folks that are there to represent and carry your voices. We also need to raise those salaries in order to bring more diverse voices to our county boards.
Natalie Roy, at Arlington County Board members raising their own salary.
Here we go. We just had this question on one of our many questionnaires, and I actually said no. And because one of the reasons I said no is because right now with the fiscal situation in the county, we need to actually evaluate what's happening with our commercial space vacancies and everything else. So I answered that question no.
Tony Weaver, should members of the Arlington County Board raise their own salary?
I'm gonna say no, and they just raised it. So I don't think that it would be appropriate to raise it again at this point. I think that when you look up here, we do actually have a pool of fantastic candidates who are running. So I think that in terms of the amount of money that people are being compensated, we are seeing talent come forward for these positions. So I don't think that it makes sense to raise it again in these financially trying times.
Maureen Coffey, should members of the Arlington County Board raise their own salary?
So we did just raise it this past weekend. I will also say I may be the first person where the part-time Arlington County Board salary is going to be a raise from my full-time salary. So I said no. I think that we'll see how this last raise plays out, and I think we do need a better system to keep adjusting it for inflation and cost of living adjustments, because this whole idea of ad hoc raises that the county board gives itself is kind of sucky and not working the best for
Jody Spain, should members of the Arlington County Board raise their own
Yeah,
salary?
it's not easy a yes or no on this one, all right? Because there's a deeper part of this question. And the deeper part goes to, is our current form of government, when we say folks are working part-time, when we know they're working more than full-time, should we consider looking at our form of government? And there's some history behind our form of government. So we just got a raise. I'm not in this for the money. I'm in here to serve. So the board just got a raise, and let's look and wait down the road. But I think the deeper part of this is really looking at the structure of our government and if this is appropriate.
Susan Cunningham, you're the last person to answer this lightning round question. Should members of the Arlington County Board raise their own salary?
So I would say not right now, but it takes 4 years to do it. So I think that we do need to continue to look at how to make it accessible for example, a single parent raising 2 children. It's a pretty standard situation in Arlington County. So I would try to move towards pegging it to something like 80 or 100% AMI, so that's feasible.
30 seconds ain't easy. All right. Natalie Roy, you get the first question here, not a lightning round question, so you get a whole 2 minutes to answer this. An eternity in public radio, by the way. What ideas do you have to make Arlington more accessible for people with disabilities?
Very good. Programs that I county has a bunch, a number of good programs that I think we should be putting more resources into for people with disabilities. And for an example, I have friends whose daughter went through the WEAVE program. And it was just a very empowering program. She did really well with it. They were very excited about it. And I would like to see more of it. That's where these are young adults who went in and were able to make products that they were able to sell. And it was very empowering for them. It was very gratifying. And I would like to see more programs like that, that the county already has in place to increase that. The other thing I would like to really focus on is also sidewalks, making sure that our sidewalks are big enough and wide enough for people who are disabled and immobile, who are in wheelchairs, who are struggling to get through. I have seen too many cases where these sidewalks are cluttered, they're not big enough, they're not wide enough. And I also, and that goes along also with curb cuts for crossing, making safe crossings on streets. So those are the kind of things that I would really, as a board member, want to focus on to help folks who have those disabilities to be able to get around Arlington in a much smoother way. And I also, one other thing is on housing. Again, I think when we talked about the density program, EHL, some of the things that some people told me in the beginning were, I can't support you because that housing that's going to come out of this program is going to produce more ADA compliant homes and units. And I said to them, where does it actually say that? Where does it say that in any of that language? And it doesn't. So I think with the next county board coming in, should really focus on that end of things for homes, so that I do have more accessible ADA compliant homes.
Tony Weaver, what will you do to make sure that Arlington is more accessible for people with disabilities?
Yes, I think that we definitely be prioritizing this. Definitely need to be making things more accessible for folks with disabilities. I would think about it kind of in 3 different ways. I would think about housing, transit, employment. When it comes to housing, I think that we need to provide more grants for folks with disabilities to make sure that they can stay and live and afford to live here in the county. I think we should be thinking about transit as well. The bottom line is many people who have disabilities rely critically on the bus system. I think that we need to expand that. We need to expand routes, make buses more accessible for folks with disabilities. And I would like to see the elimination of fares for buses. I think that it makes sense. Look at Richmond, they've eliminated fares. They've seen a massive increase in ridership. Totally makes sense when you are paying a massive amount for a bus system to charge the fare, which is a marginal portion of the total cost of the investment. I don't think it makes sense. It's a great way to improve the ability for folks with disabilities. And then employment. I think the county should be investing in biz launch to make sure that we have a clear path for folks who have disabilities to get jobs and be able to work right here in the county in a way that meets their needs and provides productive benefits to the community as a whole. So for me, kind of in sum, I would be looking at ways to make housing, transit, and employment more accessible to folks with disabilities.
Maureen Coffey, what will you do to make sure Arlington is more accessible for people with disabilities?
First and foremost, we need to embrace, incentivize, make happen universal design. If we are using design principles that are accessible to all, then it is accessible to all. Having that as the default mode of design means that everyone is included by default. We are not designing specifically to include people with disabilities. We are designing and it includes people with disabilities. That comes to housing, that comes to transportation, that covers everything. And by enacting those principles right now, even when it comes to, let's set aside housing affordability, just the number of units that are actually accessibly designed in Arlington is so tiny because we only require a proportion of a proportion to be designed accessibly. By switching to the default to have accessible design, we're going to open up opportunity for everyone in the county. So I think that needs to be a really big part of what we're doing. That means modernizing building code. That means thinking about in site plans, how do we incentivize this? It has to be an across the board change, and it has to come from the fact that we just want people to be part of our community. That also needs to include sidewalks. I know that there is a ton of problem when it comes to construction. When things are being demolished and redone and there is a change in a sidewalk, it is often not actually communicated or not well thought out. What is that going to mean for people's mobility when they're trying to cross the street or walk down the street and they have to go across somewhere where there is not a crosswalk or a curb cut? Thinking about all of these things ahead of time and being really intentional about it is going to include way more people as we do it. And so I think that has to really be a priority.
JD Spain, what will you do to make sure Arlington is more accessible for people with disabilities?
Well, thank you for the question. That's actually an area that I work on in corporate America. And I agree with the sidewalks in Arlington. We have some challenges as I walk around. A lot of things we need to fix, but I want to focus a little bit on our community. When persons with disabilities are at our highest unemployment group, I think we need to do a better job here in Arlington bringing those folks into the workforce. And when I look at county data, and I look at the jobs that are open and we can't have filled, I don't understand why the county has not pivoted and tried to figure out to fill those jobs, even with people from the disability community. It requires you to do a few tweakings to the skill sets, but it's quite doable. We should have 0 vacancies in Arlington, in my opinion. I have a HR background of 20 some odd years. So those are the type of things I want to look at to make sure persons with disabilities aren't being left behind. Work with our stakeholders in the area like the Arc of Nova and others to make sure we get this right. I'll share this story with you to let you know we still have issues here in Arlington. I was in 2100 Clarendon Boulevard about a month ago, and the individual came up to me from the county and said, JD, look at this paper and tell me what you think about it. It was a document that was going out to everyone in this community. I looked at it, the color on it was red. Anyone who knows anything about 508 compliancy, when they say you don't send documents out that are red, but the county does it over and over again. If you can't do the little things, how in the heck can you do the big things? If you can't do the little things, how can you do the big things? So I'm going to look at things under a microscope. I'm going to analyze policies and make sure we're leaving no one from the disability community behind here in Arlington. Thank you.
Susan Cunningham, what will you do to make sure Arlington is more accessible for people with disabilities?
All right, the first thing is really simple. It relates to the sidewalks, but the scooters have got to be allowed. They are. So they're a great mobility solution, but we're still learning, and we've got to figure out how to make sure that when you park that scooter, there is a serious penalty if you leave it in the middle of the sidewalk where a blind or disabled person could trip over it. Secondly, our bus service is still also maturing and sort of took a step back during the COVID epidemic. We have to have bus service for our community, and that is absolutely critical if you have a physical disability. Again, like the bikes and scooters are awesome for some, but not for everyone. And then the housing's been mentioned, so I won't go into the same details you've heard already, but I do think relooking at the accessory dwelling unit rules will help our disabled community, both in how groups can live together, but also how one can rent out more of one's house as you age or if you suffer a disability and need support. And then the last piece is really our amenities. So maybe starting with our nature centers, which are pretty much 1955 and do not have any universal design in several of them, but also our rec centers and our parks, making sure that those really are retrofitted and accessible to.
Jonathan Drunkle, what will you do to make sure Arlington is more accessible for people with disabilities?
So as has been mentioned, we need to take a holistic look and a holistic approach to how we're making our county more accessible to everybody here. That starts with also embracing conversations about the subject, but also tweaking the language that we're using to talk about folks who are differently abled or nearly divergent. Ensuring that we're using inclusive language across our policies, across our conversations, to make sure we're bringing folks and uplifting them in every way, shape we can. We've talked about transportation and our sidewalks and making sure that those are accessible for everybody and that they constantly stay clear when construction is happening or when things are moving around. Making sure also housing is accessible and we're improving on that. But we also need to look at making sure at the ability to attract businesses that are going to actively hire differently abled and neurodivergent folks and uplift them to management positions and train them and invest in those folks. We also, I think overall need to look at the representation on our boards and commissions. We do that to make sure that people have different skill sets and different backgrounds, but we also need to be prioritizing this as a sense of diversity. It's something that's often left behind when we're talking about the various aspects of diversity, but we need to include neurodivergent folks. We need to include differently abled folks and making sure that we're actively engaging with them and bringing them into these conversations. They're at the end of the day, some of the advisors, the volunteers who are giving up portions of their time to make sure that, you know, as county board members, that we're able to carry out those policies. If they're not represented at the levels that they should be on these types of boards and commissions, then we're not hearing from that community. And if we're not going out and actively engaging and being in those community centers or being where, you know, with the community, then we're going to miss out on a critical part of our community and those perspectives as we're making policies across the county.
All right, I told you this evening would fly by, and we're coming toward the end of our evening, fortunately. So before we get to the closing statements, though, I'm going to try to see if we can fit in one more lightning round question. So we'll start with Mr. Weaver and then go right on down the line. Question from the audience, 30 seconds response, please. What's your number one priority if elected to the Arlington County Board, Mr. Weaver?
Yeah, I think reducing the commercial office vacancy rate. Currently, that number is at record highs. It's about 23%. When that number goes up, we see a decrease in property tax assessments, decrease in revenues, and when revenues are down, we have to do cuts across the board. And that is critically problematic. Arlington County residents have come to expect high level of service from the county, and we need to make sure that that number gets down so that we can keep revenues up and continue to deliver the goods and services that folks have come to expect.
Maureen Coffey, what's your number one priority if elected to the Arlington County Board?
My number one priority is economic stability, and that encompasses housing, but it also encompasses things like equitable transportation, childcare access. Arlington County is the most expensive place in the country for childcare right now. We need to work on that so that families can afford to stay here. We need to work on workforce development and wages. We need to really just focus on what does it mean to be economically stable in Arlington? How can you live a life here and succeed? How can young people see a future where we aren't giving up before we've already started?
JD Spain, what is your number one priority if elected to the Arlington
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. Mental health. And it's just so appropriate that we're in the month of mental health, which is May. Because mental health and mental health awareness is a cross-cutting issue in so many other areas of what we're dealing with in our community, whether it's public safety, whether it's schools. There's second and third order effects by failure of government to do their part. So I want to build out our community-based programming, working with our schools, and make it a reality that anyone in Arlington who is suffering will have a place to go and won't have to be broke doing so.
Susan Cunningham, what is your number one priority if elected to the Arlington County Board?
For me, turn over. You hear? No, is that on precedent? No. All right, we're all like campaign cousins up here. We're taking care of each other. So my number one priority, as the only parent of school age kids up here, is really helping our kids reconnect to our community. And our young people 0 to 25 have grown up in extremely unusual times. It is part of the mental health element that JD mentioned. It is not just a schools problem. That is our community, and it must be a community-wide effort to reconnect our young people.
Jonathan Drumgoole, what is your number one priority if elected to the Arlington County Board?
So in order to tackle any of the issues that we all want to discuss here, we need to make sure that our county board is transparent in the way that we're enacting policies, transparent in the way that we're bringing in community input, and that we're also actively engaging folks. So that would be my first, that's my priority, to make sure that we're moving policies forward there.
And Natalie Roy, what is your number one priority if elected to the Arlington County Board?
Hello. We're actually the same. I was gonna say engagement and transparency would be the first thing. We, as I said, and we've all said, there's a divided community. We need to bring people together, and I think it's cross-cutting. Because one of the things that has been mentioned up here just now is the environment. And that's one of my main priorities, is reducing our contribution to climate change. So that would be, but I think overall transparency, responsiveness is really, and public engagement is what we should be working on immediately on day one.
Okay, so it has come time for closing statements. Maureen Coffey, you get the luck of the draw, the first closing statement. 5 minutes.
Hello, thank you all so much for spending your evening here with us tonight. I know that not everyone can be here, not everyone wants to be here, but I really do think that this is important. I've been a Democrat my entire life, not to age myself, but in 2008, I was in middle school and went to Barack Obama's election eve rally at the Prince William County Fairground. And that was the beginning. I have been fighting to elect Democrats, not because I think Democrats are somehow inherently better, but because the policies that they bring to the table are better for working people. They are better for everyone in this room. I have been working hard at that. I have been working not just politically, but professionally on the policy side. I work at the Center for American Progress on child and family policy. I'm a Governor Northam appointee to the Virginia Family and Children's Trust Fund, which focuses on well-being for families and children. I do this. I am a new voice, bringing new experience and a different perspective, but I have the experience to get things done, to understand how this all works, how it works together, and how we can move forward. And that's really what I want to focus on doing. Economic stability, yes, is my number one priority, but number two is long-term planning. Everyone in this room and everyone in this county should know where we're going as a community. We should feel good about the direction that we're going as a community. I think that there's some work that needs to go into getting us there. And the work really starts with public engagement. That's my number 3 priority. We need the people closest to the problems to be closest to the solution. I am a survey researcher. By nature, I am out there collecting information, collecting stories, not just quantitative, but qualitative data. How is this affecting your life? I want you to tell me what you need, because there are so many different perspectives. There's so many different parts of Arlington that are not going to be heard on a daily basis. We need to work on bringing those people out, bringing everyone together. And that has really been what I'm doing as a community member, as the president of the Virginia Young Democrats, as a member of the Arlington Dems, as a member of the Civic Federation. And that is what I will keep doing if I earn your support for the Arlington County Board. Thank you.
And J.D. Spade, your closing statement.
Oh, thank you. Well, to the Arlington County Democrats, thank you. Batteries. Arlington County Democrats, thank you once again for your time and attention. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. Give me that one. Batteries weak, yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here this evening. It just so happens to be this way. Look, veteran, African-American, grassroots community organizer, most of you know that. Married to a Hispanic wife of 30 years, biracial children. I've been here in Arlington, supported the party. I am a Democrat through and through. But at this time of our journey in Arlington, experience matters. I think this is a consequential election. It's not about solely housing. It's about people who have an innate understanding of what's going on in our community and has the relationships to work on the north side, south side, east side, west side, and push democratic values and support this party. Because it's not just this year, it's next year. Mental health is my priority, economic security is my priority, housing is my priority. I'm not going to leave anyone behind. I'm a results-oriented leader. I may rub some people the wrong way because I have the courage of a lion, but I'm here to do things and get things done. I don't need a title to define me. I serve this country. I wear the cloth of this nation. And if I'm in the office, you better believe that I'm going to represent you. That seat belongs to you, not me. And I'm going to go into that job every day, keeping you in mind. Selfless service, servant leadership. Policy, yes, I've been doing that for 3 decades. I've worked on the Hill. I've worked as a diplomat. I've worked in the Pentagon. I've checked all the boxes. But if diversity matters, representation matters, then I'm your person. I thank you for your time and attention. I hope you vote for me and another strong Democrat coming up in this election. And let's go win this. Thank you.
Susan Cunningham, your closing statement.
All right, so I am Susan, and I'm really honored to be here tonight to ask for your vote in the June 20th primary. I agree that experience matters, and especially right now, in a sort of pivotal transition moment for our county board. And I bring truly tested and proven leadership with a healthy dose of problem solving and common sense. And I think we really need that right now. Trained as an engineer, I know how to both envision and deliver the details of environmental sustainability. As a battle-tested executive, truly battle-tested, different battles, but battles at US Treasury and McKinsey, I know how to manage huge budgets and organizations through important changes and challenges. Here in Arlington, as the CEO of the housing provider AHC, during a very, very critical time for our residents and for our community and for affordable housing, I was able to bring the tools together and know the tools that we will need as a community to get housing and planning right for the long term. And currently, as the executive director at Arlington Thrive, or AMEN, if you've been here for a long time, I intimately know the challenges our community is facing at the front lines of eviction and financial need, and childcare affordability. So as a community leader, I know what works and what doesn't work and what needs to be invented and reinvented. Whether it was leading Dorothy Ham Middle School development, which was a bear of a process, or as a founding member of the Joint Facilities Advisory Commission. I know how to bring our community together. I know how important it is that each voice is there, and I will be there to represent you. And then finally, as the only parent of school-age kids, I really do think parenting, teaching, being a kid is way different today than it was 3 years ago and 5 years ago. And I think it's important to have that view on the board. So finally, as a lifelong Democrat who walks the talk on our shared values, I would be honored to represent you as the county board. And I ask for your #1 vote. We are still in need of volunteers and donations, and SusanForArlington.com is a place that will hook you up with all.
Okay. Dr. Rockroll. Your closing statement.
So it's so great to be back with Arlington Democrats. When I announced back in January that I was throwing myself into this race, I made it very clear that this wasn't about me, that it was about the opportunities that exist in Arlington. The opportunities to make sure that we're able to expand affordable housing while also increasing green space. The opportunities to continue to build our small businesses across the county that have been the backbone of our economy. But also at the same time, I'm running to make sure that we are bringing diverse voices to the table, something that's vastly missing and that we've discussed right now that is really important as we're moving forward and creating these policies here. Nearly 1 in 5 Arlingtonians identify as Latino or Hispanic, yet there's no Hispanic on the county board. 2 in 5 Arlingtonians are millennials, with the average age of an Arlingtonian being 35, yet with Katie Crystal stepping down now in July, there will not be a millennial on the county board. And then 3 in 5, as I mentioned earlier, 3 in 5 Arlingtonians are renters, yet there is not a single renter on the county board. So as we're making these policies, again, on affordable housing, small business development, we really want to make sure that they're in the best interest of everybody in our community. We got to make sure everybody's represented on the county board. I bring experience working for the Inter-American Development Bank, leading public consultation processes across Latin America. I now have the honor of working closely with the Biden-Harris administration, ensuring that our political and presidential appointees reflect the diversity of America. I know what it's like to go out into the communities and bring folks together, as I've done for the past 3 years, as the president of the statewide Democratic Latino Organization of Virginia. I will continue to do that here on the county board, bringing our communities together, pushing forward community-driven policy. So I ask that with early voting starting this Friday, that you rank me as your #1, #2. I think you get 3 ranks. So even your number third choice on there, starting this Friday, Cinco de Mayo, first time I'm celebrating Cinco de Mayo as Mexican, all the way up to June 20th. So once again, my name is Jonathan Brondel. I encourage you to visit jonathanbrondel.com to learn more. Thank you so much.
Natalie Roy, your closing statement.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here tonight. These forums are really important, not only for you to hear from us, but for us to hear exactly the kinds of concerns that you have. I'm Natalie Roy. I'm very privileged to be up here with everybody, to be asking for your vote for the county board. I've been here for 32 years. My husband and I have raised 3 beautiful daughters, all of whom gone to the Arlington Public Schools. I have decades of experience, and I do believe experience matters. I've been a community activist. I've been the head of my civic association. I have been an environmental advocate. I've run a number of environmental organizations on a wide range of issues, including recycling and solid waste and pollution prevention. I've run a statewide handgun control group. I've worked and volunteered for years for Democratic candidates. I've started, you could go back to the 80s working for the Mel King campaign in Boston. So I'm a lifelong Democrat. So, and I have to say though, in 2008, I was not in middle school, but I did work for both the Clinton and the Obama. I helped volunteer for both campaigns. So I'm very proud of that. I am running for the board to bring new energy, transparency, and responsiveness to the county board. And that is so critical in light of the contentious last couple of months that we had on zoning. And I just want to state one of the big reasons that I got in this race, because I get asked that all the time. I stepped into this race because of the zoning issue. There's no surprise here. I felt this wasn't transparent. This wasn't something that I thought was good for the community. And if you want to, go even further, I am a real estate professional. It's not, if I supported the proposal for the upzoning, it would be in my financial, it would be to my financial benefit. It's not, because I'm for smart growth and I'm for the community. And I think that's really important. I want to put that out there because I've gotten a lot of questions about that, but that is one of the reasons I stepped in. So I think there's a lot of different priorities that we've all stated, and I've named some of them, including reducing our contribution to climate change, affordable housing, diversity, fiscal responsibility, and addressing our growing mental health needs. But I want to conclude with this, is that Arlington is a great place to live. And I think most of our problems stem from the fact that Arlington is a wonderful place to be. And I think that going along with that, my philosophy is there's things we need to fix and there's things we need to preserve. So with that, thank you so much. I ask for your number 1 or your number 2. Thank you very much. And I'm so sorry I went over.
And by the luck of the draw, you get the final closing statement, Tony Woodruff.
Hey, thank you all so much. Yeah, so I just wanted to go over my top priorities. If I were elected, I would focus on reducing the office vacancy rate. I think that we need a short, medium, and long-term plan in place to do that. In the short term, I think we should continue to amend the zoning ordinance such that we can allow maximum number of business activities in office space. In the medium term, I actually think we should overhaul the zoning ordinance and move away from the prescriptive method of listing out types of use for office space to allow for a maximum amount of flexibility so we can accommodate innovative business innovations as they come up, and we're not constantly playing catch up. In the long term, I think we need to work with our nonprofit and for-profit developers to convert existing office space inventory over to residential. This will both help reduce the commercial office vacancy rate as well as help solve our housing problem. In addition, education is a major priority for me. Folks come to Arlington because of the fantastic schools. The reality is our teachers, students, and staff are reeling from the impacts of the pandemic. We're facing a mental health crisis, a drug crisis. We need to work and support, provide greater mental health resources to the folks at our schools. We need to make sure that there are more and adequate programs for students during the summer, as well as between the hours of 2 and 8 p.m. when they oftentimes lack parental supervision. Finally, I'll say that the environmental sustainability is just crucially important to our community. President Biden has signaled that we will have an increased production of electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are the way of the future. The county needs to recognize that and be planning adequately for it. We need to work with local businesses to make sure there's adequate charging infrastructure. We need to make sure county buildings are appropriately equipped. And we need to make sure that HOAs and condos have appropriate charging infrastructure in place so that the folks who live in the majority of those types of housings here in Arlington have access to electric vehicles. So with that, I will conclude by saying that I believe our best strong plan for Arlington, got the experience to make it happen, and I ask for your vote for County Board. Thank you.
All right, thank you to the candidates, thank you to the audience. I'd love to come back up to your turn.
4 more to go.
And a big round of applause for Michael Cook. A few more really important voices. I want to welcome back up Sangeeta Rao to make a couple really important announcements about our outreach group and AAPI Heritage Month.
Candidates?
Hello, good evening. As you all know, May is Asian American Heritage Month. So I just wanted to read to you, sorry, got it, great. I'm just gonna, the font is a little smaller, so I'm gonna read it to you. Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month is an annual celebration that recognizes the historical and cultural contributions of individuals and groups of Asian and Pacific Islander descent to the United States. The AAPI umbrella term includes cultures from the entire Asian continent, including East, Southeast, and South Asia, and the Pacific Islands of Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. As of 2019, so there were about 22.9 million people of Asian or Pacific Islander descent in the United States. So that number is probably about 23, 25 million now. Next slide, please. No, the other way. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so we have a couple events coming up. So we have another candidate forum, and this one is hosted by the caucuses and AYD. So we've got the AAPI caucus, the Black caucus, the Latino caucus, and the AYD, and that is on May 16th at 7 p.m. at the Arlington Community Center. And then our Labor Department caucus has an event on May 2nd, which I don't know the details about yet. My apologies. Oh, so that was yesterday. Sorry. My apologies. Okay, and then we have an AAPI event coming up on the 23rd, which SK is going to talk about.
Hi. So I would like to grab all of your attention, even though you're all speaking in the back. It is AAPI History Month, and I just want to recognize that it is so important to ignite the AAPI vote. Today, I was at the Biden administration's first AAPI event. It is the largest gathering of AAPI people in the US since 2015, and that was the largest one to happen since 1997. So it is huge that we ignite this base because it is so important. Like, people win elections now based on the AAPI vote because it is being ignited for the first time in a really, really long time. AAPI is not because we are like all one and the same. It is because we are a coalition of strength in our cultures, in our countries, in our diversity. And because of that, people tend not to invest in our constituency, which has honestly made the Democratic Party suffer. The Republican Party has actually invested more in it now recently. So to do that, we are hosting a numerous amount of events in different capacities, but one thing that we're doing at all times is having our event May 23rd at Tuna, Langston Boulevard. We're having speakers come from AAPI Victory Alliance. We did have Varun come and speak today. He was unable to really like get the point point out, just because we are facing speakers and candidate forums. But it is really important to pay attention to this community, as well as the Latinx and the Black community. As somebody who grew up in Arlington, we do better when we address the diversity that's been going on. I've only ever known the diversity in Arlington, something that does not reflect this room, to be really honest. And it makes me really sad. It really does, especially as an API caucus chair. And it's something that I really hope that we can all work to do better with. The Women's Caucus is also having their event at an API women-owned restaurant, Thai Treasure, next week, May 23rd for us. May 23rd for our event, the specific caucus event, and then May 12th for the Women's Caucus. And then, did you have anything else to add? Yeah, go API.
And just one quick announcement also, Eid is scheduled in July. Fatima is seeking volunteers. Raise your hand, Fatima.
Stevie, I need volunteers. I need help.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stankeeta. Thank you, SK. And now we're going to bring up Sarah Lanford, Bring Student Operations.
There we go. We're gonna go mobile here. Work better on the move. Okay, I know we had a fantastic candidate forum, and the early voting for them starts Friday, May 5th. But at the same time, and even sooner than that, for the primary, we have our school board endorsement vote, May 7th, 10th, and 13th. And as part of that, Precinct Ops is doing a targeted 24,000 piece lit drop. We are taking this piece of literature to 24,000 doors. But I would ask, dare I say, beg for some additional volunteers. We have about 20 routes that I'd really like to get covered before Sunday. You can see them up here. If you are willing to do any of those routes, please find me, send me a letter, call me, send a smoke signal. I will find it and I will get you the routes, because we really want to make use of these wonderful pieces of literature that comms pull together for us. That said, we also have a lot of extras. So if you want to take some of these and spread them around your community, please come find me. They're kind of in stacks of 20 or 50, and I'm happy to give those out so that they don't go to waste. Each route has about 50 to 70 doors. It'll take about an hour and a half. The weather should be good. Listen to a podcast. It'll be a super fun time. Next slide. I also keep plugging this event for our precinct captains and precinct leaders. We are having a volunteer thank you party on May 20th. I've sent out the RSVP and my last couple of emails. So just make sure you go in there. We're going to order catering soon, so I want to make sure I have a good head count. Okay, and there's no rest for the weary, so we will be poll grading on June 20th during the primary, during peak voting time. So we're not asking volunteers to be out there all day on a very hot summer day, but from 7 to 10 a.m. and 4 to 7 p.m. we're going to have volunteers at every polling location, because we find that it's really fertile ground for recruiting volunteers as they exit the polls. So of course, we're not endorsing anyone in the primary, but it's a good opportunity to recruit some more people ahead of November. So if you're a precinct captain, be on the lookout for emails about that. I want us to get through this effort first, and then I'll share more information. And then finally, our precinct ops member of the month is Colleen McCool. Big round of applause for Colleen. Colleen, but she was recently, oh, there's Colleen. Yay, Colleen. She was recently recognized at the Blue Victory Dinner as our Herschel Milliken Precinct Captain of the Year for all the amazing work she does in Campbell, which is one of our most democratic precincts. And she just invests so much time in trying to register voters in her neighborhood, but also doing a lot of targeted outreach to Spanish-speaking voters, which is super, super important. So if you see more, Colleen, make sure to tell her congratulations. And with that, I will hand it back to you, Steve.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for all that hard work. Now let's bring up Arlington Young Democrats.
Hello. We'll keep it quick this time. We're on the first slide. So April was a busy month for us. We had VAYD. I'm happy to report on the next slide. Actually, Yeah, we'll go to that next slide real quick. Arlington Dems had a series of members who were voted into the state Virginia AYD leadership team. So here are all of our AYD members who will be serving us at the state level. And that was possible because of the donations given to us for our fundraiser. So thank you to everyone who donated. And Sam, if we can go back to the other slide. All right, thank you. We also had our birthday happy hour at Spider Kelly's. It was a great time. We did trivia. And the winner donated $25 to Autism Self-Advocacy Network, which is great. And then we had our school board forum at Lover Run. And of course, this past weekend, we had Blue Victory After Dark. Thank you to everyone who purchased a ticket and who attended. We had a great time. And then in May, we have the county board forum with the AAPI, Black and Latino caucuses, as Sangeeta mentioned earlier. And then May 23rd, we have a happy hour at Tuna. They have a location on the Pike, and that will be with the AAPI caucus as well. And that'll be at 7 p.m. and I will hand it off to Tinley for the wrap.
All right, on the next slide, here we go. So just want to give a quick shout out to everyone who came out to our Blue Victory After Dark following the Blue Victory dinner. We wouldn't have been able to do this with all of our guests, our dedicated volunteers, and especially from our sponsors. And those sponsors were Senator Barbara Favola, Senator Janet Howell, County Board Member Matt DeFerrante, County Board Member Katie Crystal, Commonwealth's Attorney Brissa Degani-Tafti, NAACP President of Arlington, and RLDEM's Deputy Chair Mike Heminger, Adele McClure, Jose Quiroz, Maureen Coffey, Jonathan Dromgold, Josh Catcher, Charlie Conrad, and VAYD President Matt Royer. And also with our next slide, just want to do a quick little update. So having successfully rechartered with VAYD, part of that is submitting our annual anti-discrimination policy. And I just think it's a good time to re-up that, remind everyone that at all of VAYD's public meetings, all levels of the Arlington Young Democrats shall be open to all who consider themselves members of the Democratic Party, regardless of race, gender, identity, age, creed, national origin, religious, ethnic identity, sexual orientation, economic status, or physical disability, hereinafter collectively referred to as status. Discrimination on the basis of status in the operating of organizational affairs is prohibited. In addition, I'd like to do a quick reminder on our code of conduct for anyone who attends our events, and for broad strokes, this highlights the importance of respecting others, not tolerating any form of discrimination, assault, or harassment, the importance of consent, being responsible, abiding event-based rules, and resolving conflicts respectfully. We want to strive to make sure our events are safe and inclusive, and periodic reminders such as these are important. You can find both of these policies in full on our website under the policy tab, and then under the Constitution tab at the bottom of the page. And thank you so much for your time. And Steve, I think I'll welcome you back up.
All right. Beyond Arlington, last speaker.
All right, just a couple of things. That one thing we did and one thing we're going to do. We'll do more than that, Richard. All right, on April 25th, we made phone calls for 3 candidates in Western Prince William. Danica Rome, who most of you here know, was running for the state senate after serving in the state house of delegates. And Josh Thomas and Travis Nemhart were both running for the House of Delegates. And we even had Travis show up to thank us for our good work.
And then Tuesday, May 9th, we are making calls for Josh Cole. I think many people here know Josh, who served a term in the House of Delegates representing the Fredericksburg area. He's running again, this time to see this a little more democratic. And we are going to be making calls for him Tuesday, May 9th at 6 p.m. Please bring a phone and a laptop if you're coming. And there will be refreshments, and Josh will be kicking us off virtually. It's going to be at Kip's house, you know what that is. So here we have our apply at Sarah's house too, yeah. Here we have a QR code. 1309 South Monroe. Yeah. All right, thank you very much.
Steve.
Be sure to come to the June meeting for an update on ranked choice voting and how it's going to work in the primary. Very excited about it. Thanks for coming, everyone.
And don't forget, early voting starts on Friday in 2 days. Early voting. You can ask about the parking garage. Yeah.
Good night.
And the parking garage, I think